Like, who would have thought? Okay.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good recipe.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Anais. Gerald.
I'm Gerald.
I'm Andy.
Okay.
We weren't sure we were live because no one told us.
That's so true. No one did tell us. I did not say it. Anyway, so before we get into what we discussed this week, we actually are not discussing what we said we were going to discuss at the end of the last episode. We had said some story in Granta, and we're not doing that. Instead, we've decided to change our story picking method. So instead of picking randomly from freely published stories on the internet, we're going to read an anthology from beginning to end, one story per week. So the first anthology we're doing, which is what we're kicking off with today, is Hateship, Friendship, Courtship, Loveship, Marriage by Alice Munro. We're reading the first story, which is the titular story today. Well, we already read it. We're going to discuss it. And we're going to do this because we're hoping it's going to improve the quality of the stories we read, improve the discussions, and make them a bit meatier and give us something bigger to discuss in a certain context, right? We get to discuss like the whole work in the context of the anthology. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm. I'm already happy with this choice. So...
Yes. Just...
Are you happy? Is this a preview of your thoughts about the story?
Yes.
Or are you just happy about the formatting?
Both. I think the format's better, and it's already paying off. Yeah. Okay. So, do you guys have anything to say about changing the format, or good to rip into the summary?
I think it's going to be interesting.
I think the idea of using published... Oh.
I think there's a delay.
Is there a big delay on my side?
Yeah.
Oh,
I
geez,
see.
Sorry.
Gerald, let's hear your
Andy.
thoughts. They're the best thoughts.
Are they? If you say so. I think the that's why you when I said I'm Gerald, you said Gerald, and because there was a big delay anyway. Yeah, I think the idea of using published stories is better. I mean, it's certainly a lot easier for us because we don't have to scour the internet for free and accessible stories that we can read. And also, it's interesting to sort of sometimes compare the work of an author with their other works, as we'll be doing with this anthology, and I think the simplification that we don't have to record the audio and we don't have to wade through a backlog of audio files and we're already a bit behind with the podcast anyway. I think this is it's a much better, much simpler format for us.
Oh yeah, I didn't mention that part. We're going to make it YouTube only. Basically, we just like discussing stories, and we're like, let's not worry about the show as much. It'll just go to YouTube, and we'll start just pushing the YouTube to the website, and it won't be over all the podcast streaming things, and I'm fine with that. So, yep.
I especially like that part because I've always felt guilty about not doing any sound editing for the podcast streaming part. But also, I wasn't about to learn how to do sound editing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We all have other stuff. We all have other things going on. And we just like the discussion of short stories. And YouTube is perfectly fine. It has billions of views. Like, it is accessible to whoever wants to follow along. Okay. But it also means it would be very raw, because sometimes when I was doing sound editing, I would edit out whenever we were repetitive. So, feel free to listen on 1.5 speed.
You edited out all the times we were repetitive?
Not all the times, but when I was like, we have made this point 3 times already, and we're just saying it again. Yeah, I would cut it.
Anise, that's the bit.
I would lose. No, I would lose.
How do you feel the time?
5-6 minutes of Oh, hi Day. Great news since I'm only on YouTube. Yeah, I would cut about 5-6 minutes out of every episode where it's just like, all right, we got this. Yeah. Okay. Are we ready to discuss this story? So we're discussing.
Yeah, can I have
Hateship,
just
Friendship-
one
Yeah.
1 minute? Just a
Yeah.
second.
For the delay. You just put
Yep.
them right. Yeah, that's a good idea. hmm
This is compelling content.
You know what? I can do the summary. He read the story. He doesn't need to hear
He
my summary.
knows.
Here's the other thing about published stories. The summaries are sometimes already available online. So I just ripped this from Wikipedia. I love making my life easier and more efficient. Okay, so here's the summary for Hateship, Friendship, Courtship, Loveship, Marriage by Alice Munro. In southwestern Ontario, Canada, Joanna, a plain, poor, unmarried woman, works as a housekeeper for Mr. Macaulay and his granddaughter, Sabitha. Sabitha's mother is dead, and her father-in-law, and her father, Ken Boudreau, lives elsewhere in poverty, frequently pleading with his father-in-law for money. Sabitha is friends with Edith, a shoe repairman's daughter who feels bored with her constricting blue-collar lifestyle. Edith devises a hoax in which she and Sabitha forge love letters between Sabitha's father, Ken, to Joanna. Joanna, convinced by the letters that Ken will marry her, uses her substantial savings to travel to his remote location in rural Canada. She discovers that Ken has fallen ill, and lovingly she nurses him back to health. Having realized that Ken cannot control his own life, Joanna takes charge and arranges for them to start a new life. Ken, impressed by Joanna's resolve and by her savings, does not question her decisions. One good choice in Ken's life. Several years later, Edith learns that Ken and Joanna have married and had a child. She is confused by the consequences of her hoax, but soon focuses once more on her desire to escape her parents' lifestyle and show everyone who she really is. I love this story. Who would like to go first?
Yeah.
Is there still a delay, Gerald? It sounds like you're you're not as delayed now.
Am I delayed now?
It seems like half of what it was before, maybe.
Okay. Yes.
You can go first.
Okay, I'll go first. Yeah, I initially had difficulties with an unusual setting. It's set in 1950s Ontario, and because it's a little bit alien to me, and also the style of writing is very different to what I've been reading lately. So it took me a little while, and I seem to struggle for the first sort of 10-15% or something of the story, to sort of get to grips with it. There's a lot of characters, a lot of names, but then as I got into it, I started to enjoy it a little bit more. I had to draw a little guideline for who's who and where and who's connected to who, because I found it a bit confusing. But then I'm old, and there was a word towards the end of secret, and I thought, what's the secret? I didn't sort of understand the secret, so I had to go back to that. Oh, of course, the secret is the forging the letters and the whole sort of creation of the romance between Joanna and Ken. But I loved her detail. I've always loved her detail. How much it never seems too much detail. There's a lot of detail, but it never seems too much. That it's just unnecessary. It seems to be relevant, perhaps not important, but relevant and interesting, and adds to the overall sort of enjoyment of the story. So yeah, I enjoyed it pretty much.
Yeah. Andy?
Like Gerald, I was also bothered by the fact that all the characters had names. Authors, here's a pro tip. Stop naming your characters. Just call them that guy who did that thing. Makes it a lot easier.
But now your actual opinion of the story.
No, man, I struggled a little bit. I found it a tad tedious. Yeah, I know. I felt bad.
Good, you should.
But I was like, okay, and
throughout you found it tedious. At no point were you screaming?
At no point was I screaming. It grew on me a little, but I did not begin to scream at any junction. There was one note I highlighted, and I'll circle back to that later because I thought that was funny. A little bit, I was just trying to grip like whose actually story is this, right? Is this about Edith? Like, what am I? Who
Edith,
do I care?
Edith out of nowhere. Yeah.
Right, Edith out of nowhere. I'm
I
like,
thought it
oh,
was Joanna, and it is Joanna, but also Edith. Yeah.
right. And then like, is it actually right? Is it actually Edith?
But that is a thing stories do all the time. Stories can be about more than one person.
Yeah, stories can be about more than one person.
What?
Yes.
Not always that they are actually, though. Especially like for a short story to have like fully two main characters. And also, I thought maybe the second main character would be. I'm not looking at my notes right now. Is her name Sabbatha?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought maybe it was going to be Sabbatha. I was like, no, it's not Sabbatha. She's not.
No. It's almost Mr. Macaulay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, well.
I did like when we finally got to Ken and he's just like, oh, what? Oh, you're okay. You're a rich lady who's going to take care of me. Cool. Questions nothing ever again for the rest of his life.
He put it together very quickly. Yeah. Well, because remember, Ken knows that at one point a while ago, Joanna had a crush on him because of that first letter where she's like, here's my life story that he ignored and did not reply to.
He actually got that letter and he ghosted her.
And he ghosted her. Exactly. He ghosted her in the 50s. He was like, oh, she's dead. I told her she was a trustworthy person and she fucking lost her mind and was like, marriage immediately. So I ghosted her ass. And then unbeknownst to me, my daughter's sly little cunning friend Edith has been romancing her. Yeah.
Edith.
I was screaming when I was like, Edith, when she first like steamed and like opened it. I was like, oh my God.
Because as that scene unfurled, I was like, oh, they read all of her letters back and forth. I was like, oh, they wrote her letters.
Right. I was screaming at this plot development out of nowhere because the story does not prepare you for this. And then it happened. And you're like, oh my God.
Right. I didn't expect Edith to have any sort of agency or plot impact. I thought we were doing a quick aside, like with fucking.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Old Man Jones.
It's Edith. Edith is just this like friend who just is there that Joanna barely likes. And then it's like, listen, Joanna, you should be grateful to Edith, I guess. But not even, right? Like, what is Joanna getting out of this?
Nothing she couldn't do on her own except for the fact that she was a woman.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, she's doing everything, but there did need to be a guy there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she needs to be, she needs to have someone to look after. She needs to have someone she can care for and do things for. There's never been any sort of reluctance on her part to take on this new role with Ken, and so I think that's what she's getting out of it. She's getting a sense of duty and a sense of being needed, and she's a mother now, of course.
Yeah. Incredible. Also, I loved, like, I don't always love this, but because Alice Munro's so good, she'll like randomly like POV hop into random people's heads that you really didn't need to POV hop to. I love when we were in Kevin's point of view. Like, not Kevin, Ken's point of view. Like, okay, because you already have a certain picture of Ken as this like grifter con man person, right? And then you actually get in his head and you see how he frames it, and you're almost like you're not sympathetic to him, but you just want to be like, whatever, you're just some dude. Like, he becomes so smaller than a con man, smaller than like,
right.
It's incredible. It's like, you're just like, oh, I love that line about how he thought life should be more heroic than it is, and he's like very loyal all the time to his friends, and then uses that as an excuse for like weird corners he gets himself into. Like, it's not my fault. The boss wouldn't understand that this was a completely necessary thing to do, and you're like, you are this is incredible. Yeah. And then also just like Mr. Macaulay walking around the day that after Joanna left, and he's just like telling everyone like, and then I got this letter, and he's asking for money, and he took my housekeeper, and it's just incredible. Oh, I thought it was good. And the shoe repairman and his wife gossiping about him a little bit, like over dinner. Like, oh, something's wrong, maybe a stroke, because he's talking about his problems. I love it. Yeah. Oh, it's so good. Yeah. And also just like the whole
I did think it, yes, there's this.
Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. The head hopping is a bit unusual and does take a little bit of getting used to because we're not used to it, and we're used to having a central character whose head we're in or around, and other people are supplementary characters, and so it is, you do have that question mark, but who's the story about, and also she's totally in the head of the character when she hops. She's totally so when Mr. McCauley's walking around, and you know, it's his story. It's just not being observed. It's what he's doing, and so it was very clever to do that, and slightly different, and slightly disquieting, slightly a little bit not I wouldn't say annoying, but it's just it's a deliberate, and it takes some getting used to.
She would normally put in a big paragraph, a spaced big paragraph break before a big jump, but not always. I noticed in there was a Ken Joanna scene where she swapped between them within that same scene without a big break. And I'd love to go back and, like, this is probably a good like craft study, and go back and decide like when does she decide she needs a big break and when doesn't she, and why. Because I thought it was super clever, because it didn't bother me when she didn't do a big break. It felt totally natural how she would sort of just do it. I recently read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Levin, and she does the same thing in a scene where she'll just like hop sometimes. Like she'll start in one point of view and then she'll just like hop a little bit, and it works. Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was great. I thought it was very clever. And that whole scene with Edith and Sabitha, when Sabitha comes back from 3 weeks away at her cousin's, and she's like all like sexed up, like just like this bad influence, and Edith is like, your organs are gonna get congested. She doesn't say it, but yeah.
She's like, that's probably not true, but it's not as not true as the boots. I like that bit.
The one thing, though, about it being a short story is that then you have to, Munro has to find a place to end it. We started with this being the story of Joanna. We ended it with it really being the story of Edith, because it starts on Joanna's note and it ends on Edith's note. But we then learned that it kind of started on Joanna's note, but that was all kind of orchestrated by Edith anyway. We just didn't know at the time. But it's kind of interesting that she ends it at Edith sort of getting away with this hoax and just wanting to not grow up into being her parents, but that wasn't really like the main theme throughout. So it was a little bit of an odd note for me to end on, a tiny bit. We get the resolution with Joanna. She gets her kid.
Right.
She's living a better life. We get that. But I guess there just isn't an emotional beat there to end with Joanna, so you have to end with Edith. I think that's why. Because like if you just ended with Joanna gets what Joanna wants, and we're ending in a scene with Joanna where Joanna's like, and now she has her baby. We're like, yeah, but like this wasn't a story about Joanna struggling to like find her place in society. She was totally fine until Edith pushed her out through a hoax, right? So it doesn't, that note doesn't make sense. She just sort of ended up there because she's like, you know, if you see the history of her life that she wrote in that letter, it's very much like, and there was an opportunity here and I took it, but it was never, but it was never like this yearning. Like she was fine to be with Mrs. Willett for, was it 12 years? More?
Yeah. If Mrs. Willett hadn't died, that would have been. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's not like she's like yearning for anything more. So then to be like, and she got what she wanted would be a weird note to end on. Cause it's like, she didn't want much. Yeah. Yeah, so I see like why from like a writing perspective really, you end up with this, but it's weird.
Yeah, and really, that's not the story, is it? It's not the story about Johanna and what she strives for and what she doesn't strive for. The story is about the kids and what they do and how they created this, and it just sort of went completely. I don't know whether it had no, because he didn't go out of control. It's what they were looking to do. They was looking. Maybe they were just having fun, and maybe the romance came about as just messing about, perhaps.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And a lot of Munro stories are girls, young women, teenagers playing and having some consequence. Like a lot of her stories are about that. Like we've read some stories, like it's usually girls in a coming of age kind of way. That tends to be a recurring theme in her stories. We've read a couple of her stories in the podcast before. We're going to read this anthology, so I'd expect to see more of that. So it makes sense that really it's about Edith and Sabitha. That's in keeping with what Munro likes to write about, but it's just very funny. Like, because like when you start reading the story, it's, you know, the whole introduction to Joanna, where she starts Munro briefly, then is in the point of view of the train station agent, and it's like judging her the whole time, or how other people see her as well, is really interesting. And you very quickly understand, like, she's sort of a main character, but she doesn't really have a strong through line to carry the story. She's being drug along by something else, and then you learn later it's Edith. That's why I started screaming.
Right.
Like,
right, because we see Joanna from the train station agent, from the dress shop lady, from Mr. Macaulay.
Yeah.
And finally, we start seeing Joanna from Edith's perspective, and it's like, oh wait, Edith's actually the main character.
Yeah, Edith's actually doing something here, and oh my god. Also, Edith and Sabitha co-writing the letters, and Sabitha like just being horned up the whole time, and Edith being like, no. I know exactly what Joanna wants. I have read her, and she was so right. Also, we never get to read the letter that Joanna sent directly to Ken.
Right.
Oh my god. That must have been so good.
Right. She thinks about it a little.
It's incredible. Yeah. I had a thought at one point that Joanna has a bit of a Arrested Development thing going on, because I'm getting the impression this woman's in her 30s, and without a promise of much, she's just like going west, gonna marry this man on nothing. This is very adolescent in her thinking and decision making. Yeah, like she was a good mark. Everyone knows she's strange in a particular way, and that's part of it.
Yep.
Like she has all this savvy, but she doesn't have good emotional.
Yeah,
or
because
social intelligence.
Yeah, because right from the start we know that she's going to get married with the dress shop, and that was and she realizes that it's sort of kind of strange relationship, and you know, there's been no sort of romance building up to it, but she's heading west and going to get married, and it seems like she decided that's what she needed to do. So I think that's kind of what you that start of the story is what makes you think that's what the story is going to be about, which it sort of is, but then sort of isn't, because it's about the kids.
And because in many ways Ken, like Joanna, can just sort of get pulled along by circumstance, right? Ken also doesn't want for much except to just exist. I mean, there's that whole thing about how, like, oh, he's wrapped up with these two women who are just yelling at him all the time because they're mad at him because he's playing both of them. Oh, maybe Joanna could be his ticket out of that problem too. Like, he's so small. That was one of the funniest things. The big reveal of how Ken sees himself was incredible. Yeah, because I feel like it's built up to that moment where, like, especially the way Mr. Macaulay sees him, where like Ken could get away with anything with any woman, and he blah 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 and this and that, and the way he's like writing to Sabitha, and then you like meet Ken in his own point of view, and you're like, he's a chump. He's a total chump. Incredible reveal. Yeah.
I thought it was quite interesting that we saw Ken from Mr. Macaulay's point of view, like he's this loser that keeps asking for money and wants more money and doesn't repay it and all this, and then actually to add in the extra layer of how Ken saw himself as being this, you know, just this good guy that helps people out and does the right thing, and oh, look what's happened now, oh dear, look what's happened to me because of how good I've been.
Exactly. So like when you're in Mr. Macaulay's point of view, and Mr. Macaulay's like, he's this loser who's taking advantage of me. I'm here thinking, oh, Ken's a con man. Ken's slick. He knows exactly what he's doing. Ken's playing everyone. No, Ken isn't even that cunning. Like he's not even cunning enough to be a con man. He's not even good at that. Incredible.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm really happy we're reading this anthology. I'm just very excited for more of these kinds of shenanigans of just girls being ridiculous. Kind of bad.
Yeah. Looking forward to the rest of it. It's
there I am. There was an airplane. Yeah. I will say I made one highlight, and that was specifically at the moment we were sort of finding out about Edith as a character while Mr. Macaulay was going on his rant. And he said, "Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long in the..." And Edith said, "shoe repair shop."
Mm-hmm.
I was like, Edith, that's going to be all right.
Yeah, Edith is so done. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else we want to say about this story?
don't think so.
And then next week we're reading the next one, which I think Floating Bridge, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay. Also, her stories tend to go long, but I forgive her because I like it. I did in the beginning have to get a little used to her style, but this is like true of every author when I'm switching, right? Like every author, like at least a good one has a very distinct voice that you have to learn. If it's not just like same copying what's like a million people are doing out there, good one that has a distinctive voice takes me a couple pages to get into their rhythm. And then once I do, I'm like, I'm in. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested in seeing how this is going to go. We're going to read several of her stories in a row. Because this one I didn't all the way get into the groove of her voice. One story alone. I didn't love it.
Okay.
But it'll either grow on me or grate on me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm coming in out of 5.
And we do. Oh. Rating.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a solid 4.
Okay.
Are we rating out of 5 now?
No, out of 6, but there's room for growth here.
Oh, okay. I thought. Oh, you said you're coming into 5, right? Sorry. Duh. I'll.
Don't be influenced by my
Yeah, I'll go between you. 4.5.
4.5.
Yeah, 4.5. 4.5. Yeah.
Okay. And next week we're just going to read the next story of the anthology. Wow, I love it. Floating Bridge. All right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you guys want to say before I do outro? No. Okay. All right. And before you go, tell us which marriages you arranged via hoax in either our Facebook discussion group, Literate House Readers, or right here in the YouTube comment section. You can just like tell us, did you lie to people and then they got married and you're like, woof, got away with that somehow? If so, please report. All right. Keep this podcast going by leaving a review wherever. Actually, no, because I'm not going to keep that going. But tell us what you think. Again, Facebook or YouTube. That is how we are limiting this now. But do share this podcast with your fun aunt who lives in Toronto. Until next time, read a good story. Thank you for joining, Day. Bye.